Alright, hello everybody, welcome back to another video. For today's video, I want to go over the database class methods. In the previous video, we talked about DML statements, so I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of wrap up this section of Apex programming by talking about the database class methods. So right now, as you can see, I'm in the Apex Developers Guide. It's just a documentation for it. And as we can see, we're looking at the differences between DML statements, which is this one, and the database class methods right here. So like I said in the previous video, we talked about the DML statements. So in this example right here, we can see that we have a list. We're adding 2 new account objects into this list, and then we're just inserting that list right there. To do the same thing for the database class method, it's a little different. So you still have your list of accounts, you're inserting some account objects into that list, but then in order to insert it into the database, you use the Database.insert method. Now the insert method, or rather any of the operations, there are a couple of arguments that you can have to it. The first one will be what you're trying to insert, and the second one will be a flag. In this case, it's a Boolean. You're going to have either true or false. If you specify true, then it will act pretty much just like how a DML statement acts, in the sense that if it's set to true, that means if any of these accounts fail to insert for some reason, whether it be for a validation rule or anything, all of it will be rolled back, which means none of them will be inserted. But if you set it to false, that means that if one account fails for a particular reason, but the other accounts wouldn't fail, then it can be partially inserted. So for example, let's say this one, we had some other fields that we were also inserting for this account, and it triggered a validation rule, which means it's not a valid account, but this one was fine. This one would be inserted, but this one would not be. So like I said, it allows for partial operations. There is a third flag, I believe, for certain amount of operations, and we can get into that in a little bit. But as you can see here, like I said, to use this method, we call it the database class, and then the name of our operation. In this case, we're just doing an insert. And then what this returns is an array of database.save results. And this is important because with database class methods, we don't actually have to use try catches to handle any type of errors. Any errors will be saved in this array right here. And as you can see from lines 9 to 22, this example code actually iterates through that array, and they have a little bit of basic logic to see what actually happened. So for example, this branch of logic right here, it's checking to see if that specific element was successful. And just to kind of explain this a little bit, you'll have an element in the array for each element in the list that you're trying to do a DML operation for. So for example, this account list has 2 accounts in it. So that means that this save results array will have 2 elements, one for each of the accounts. So if that first, going through this for loop, if that first element was successful, then they're just outputting that it was a success. But if there was an error, because this was not successful, then you can iterate through the get errors array. This is the method that is contained inside of this array. And it allows you to iterate through the error array of it, or rather the object. So in this case, they're just outputting to the console a bunch of different errors. So you would want to do this, if you, for example, if you wanted to retry to do the DML operation for some reason. So I will leave this documentation in the description box down below. So I won't really bother reading too much of it. Pretty much talks about what I said. For example, right here you can see If you specify false for the parameter and a record fails, the remainder of the email operations can still succeed. So like how I said, you can do partial operations. Okay, so I think for the next part is we can jump into the actual database class itself and just kind of like look through it. Or rather, I think I'll pick a few of the same methods that I did for the DML operations, and then we can kind of just play with them in the developer console. So let's jump into that. Okay, so I think for this video, since we kind of already went over, I believe in the last video or in the DML operations video, we went over insert, update, upsert, and delete, I believe it was. So pretty much all the major ones. For this one, I kind of just want to jump into maybe just insert, just because it is a bit more involved, I think. So yeah, let's talk about the insert database method. And again, just in the developer console, we'll be doing this just in the playground class instead of the playground constructor, so I can just easily call it from the execute anonymous. So if we look for the insert method in the database class in the documentation, you can see we have a few of them. We have this one, this one, this one, this one, and then there's also this one right here, which we won't really get into. I just want to keep it fairly basic today. So just kind of reading through these real quick. The first insert only has 2 arguments or parameters. I forget what the correct terminology is. But anyways, the first one is just the record you want to insert, whether it's a list or just a record itself. And then the Boolean flag, which specifies, whether you want all of them to be inserted or none, which basically means, like how I said with the true flag or false flag, if you set it to true, if one of them fails for any reason, all of them fail, so they all get rolled back and nothing gets inserted. If you set it to false, then whether or not one of them can't be inserted doesn't matter. It'll try to insert all the ones it can. The second one, same thing. Actually, these are pretty much the same. I think one lets you do, so this will be like a list, I guess. So you can, insert just one record, like one account, or a list of accounts in this case. Same thing for this one, S objects, so custom objects as well. And then the one I wanted to get into, and actually I do want to backtrack a little bit and say there are a few methods, like how I said, that have 3 parameters. So for example, like this method right here, get deleted, it has 3 parameters. The one I was referring to when I mentioned that earlier was, I believe, the upsert method. You can see here, this one has 3 parameters or arguments or whatever. So the first one, again, that's just what you want to insert, and then the flag is still here. That's the third one, so all or nothing. But then this one here is the second one, so that's the external ID field. And I'll probably make a separate video for this one because I thought it's kind of interesting. But basically what it allows you to do is when you're inserting or updating records using this database class method, the upsert one, you can specify some ID of this record to say that it's basically unique and that it's coming from an outside system. So you would usually use these for integrations. If you had an integration between 2 different systems, one being Salesforce, obviously, one being like an external system, and you were receiving these records like via a web service, you can specify the external ID itself, basically telling Salesforce that use this ID to basically either find the record we're trying to insert, or if it doesn't exist, find the record that we're trying to update, or if it doesn't exist, just insert it. Like I said, I'll make a more detailed video about this in the future. But for now, let's just get into this insert method right here. So I think what I'll do is I'll pretty much just copy this code snippet right here and then paste it into the developer console. And then we can kind of just mess around with it for a little bit. So let me format it really quickly. And I guess just in case you ask, the way I formatted it is just by clicking, or rather typing in Shift Tab at the same time, and it'll automatically format it for you. So anyways, we've basically already went over the code. So if we were to run this, let me just go ahead and save it. Let's go into our execute anonymous, and let's type in the name of our class, playground, pg equals new playground. And just by creating the class, the constructor will get called. So our code should execute. Let's go ahead and open the log. All right, so let's go to the debug only, and you see here that we were able to successfully insert 2 accounts. And they have different IDs, so that means it's 2 separate accounts. So if I were to just copy this ID right here, and we were to go to our Salesforce org instance, you can find that account. And as you can see here, that's Acme1 right there. And I can do the same thing for the other one right here. And there is Acme2. So let's see if we can get some errors. So basically, when you run the code, both accounts were able to be inserted successfully. So, we did the successful insert. Right here, we're specifying that we want to insert these 2 accounts from this account list, and then it's false. Or rather, the all or none flag is false, which means that we are allowing partial database operations. So, like I said, let's try to make something fail. And I believe probably the easiest way to do that is I'm pretty sure that the account needs a name, or else it won't save. It won't insert, because I believe name is a required field. So if I were to insert this, and here, let me make this Acme3, just so we can have some uniqueness in the system. So let's go ahead and try this. And if I'm right that the name is unique, we should, once the database operation runs and we're iterating through our arrays of save result list, we will get the Acme3 to be a success. So it'll output successfully inserted account ID, whatever it is. But then for the one that failed, it'll go through this branch of code right here. So let's try that very quickly. Let's click on the debug only, and you'll see here that we were able to successfully insert an account. So very quickly, let's just copy the ID. Let's go to our instance, type it in there, and we should see here that's Acme3. Okay, so now let's go to the next debugs, and you see here we have some error messages. So the following error has occurred, which is if we go back here, you see that that's the first debug right there. The second one should be just the status code with the error message, and then the third one will be what actually failed, right? So let's go back to our log, and we'll see here that it failed because it's missing a required field, which is the name, which makes sense because, as I suspected, the name field is a required field for account object, and then it tells you here what it failed. So that's how we were able to use, a database method operation. And as I mentioned before, doing it this way means that we won't have an exception being thrown out by the system. So it means we don't have to have any try catches. And we get the benefit of being able to do a partial operation. So for example, let me go ahead and update this to 4. And let me set this flag to true, just to really hammer that in. So now, because we set this to true, that means that no account should be inserted into the system. So let's go ahead and run this one more time. And you see here that in this case, we just got a straight up exception, which kind of means it wasn't entirely telling the truth, I guess, about the try catch exceptions, which I believe it is explained here in the documentation. Yeah, I guess it's interesting. What I was expecting is for it to just go into the database, the else part of the logic instead of throwing out an exception like this. So that might be something to look into or Google in the future if you're interested. But anyways, at least we were able to prove that by setting this to true, basically all of it has to be valid when we're trying to insert it. So anyways, let's go ahead and set this back to false. And before we wrap up this video, I want to kind of walk through the error handling when it's set to false, so that we're allowing partial operations. And in this case, I guess one thing we could do if this was an actual if we were actually coding for something in production or trying to get something into production, I guess the scenario I'm trying to think of is we're developing some new feature and we're now inserting some account records for some reason. And for some reason, the requirement is that we want to allow partial insertions in this case. And the requirement is, if for some reason the accounts that we're trying to insert can't be inserted, then what we could do is when they go into this error state right here, we could iterate through here, and you could add some code that check to see what the problem is, and based off of that, you could try to fix the error, and then maybe retry to insert it. Or rather than doing that, you could probably, if you have some type of object in your system that tracks errors, you could probably create one of those types of records to be inserted. You kind of as like an error catch, and then now you would know, okay, we got this error because someone tried to insert an account without a name or something. So yeah, that's what this could be used for. I think it's pretty useful. All right, I think that's pretty much it. Trying to keep it a short video because I do want to start making a lot more of these videos. Usually it kind of takes me kind of long to make videos when I try to plan them out. So let me know if you guys like this type of video where it's a bit more unstructured. Basically all I'm doing is, when I have free time, I kind of just go through the documentation and see, what I think could be useful. So if you guys have any suggestions or want to see me cover anything specific, please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.